So I want to start today by asking you a question. And when I say you, I'm talking specifically to the men in our audience.
Yeah.
Uh, have you ever felt like you're playing a game where the rule book was just quietly rewritten while you were in the bathroom?
Right, like you missed a memo or something.
Exactly. You come back to the table
Yeah.
and you're playing by the rules you were taught. Work hard, be stoic, provide, protect. But suddenly, those exact moves are getting you penalized.
Yeah. You're working harder than ever. You're walking on eggshells at work and at home.
And yet somehow, you are the bad guy in every single narrative.
It's the sensation of the goalposts not just moving but actively being weaponized against you.
Yeah, it's this gnawing sense that the machinery of society, so we're talking courts, HR departments, even your own relationships,
Right.
that they've been captured by a set of rules you never actually agreed to. And today, we're going to dive deep into validating that exact feeling.
We're doing a forensic audit of this whole dynamic.
We are, and we are using a source that is, frankly, explosive. Today's deep dive is focused on the ebook called Emotional Tax Only Men Pay, Men Are Women's Punching Bags, and PMS, A Legal Defense for Murder by Conrad Riker.
And right off the bat, we should say this is not a traditional self-help book. Riker frames this whole text as a red pill wake-up call for men.
Yeah, the mission of this deep dive is really to look at how he performs this autopsy on modern institutions. He's exploring how they were captured by feminist and Marxist ideology way before most of us even noticed.
He calls it a matriarchal mirage.
Right. And look, we are going to cover some data points today that are probably going to make you angry. We're talking about the book's claims regarding murder charges dropped because of PMS, men fired for their tone, and the 3 S's of reclaiming your sovereignty.
But before we descend into all that madness, we have to be clear. We can really only scratch the surface of this text here.
Exactly. If you want the full arsenal of facts and the history of how these institutions were captured, you need to buy this book. It's available right now on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books, so go get it.
And hey, while you're at it, please hit that like and subscribe button for our show. The algorithms do not exactly love pushing this kind of unvarnished content, so we really need you to help us get it out there.
Absolutely. So let's just jump right into the core thesis here, the emotional tax. Riker isn't using this as just some clever metaphor, is he?
No, not at all. He views this as a literal systemic extraction of male energy and resources.
Okay, break that down for us.
So the book argues that the emotional tax is the invisible cost that men pay in their sanity, their career capital, and their dignity just to exist in modern society. Riker's premise is that in a feminized culture, women are essentially permitted to be emotionally volatile and chaotic.
Like it's treated as a natural force.
Right, exactly. Like the weather, you can't get mad at the rain. But men, conversely, are expected to just act as the shock absorbers for all that chaos.
He uses this analogy in the book, The Emotional Janitor, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, think about a janitor in a building. He doesn't create the mess. He doesn't spill the coffee in the hallway or drop the trash. But it's his job to clean it up silently and without complaint.
Right.
Riker argues that modern men have been conditioned to become emotional janitors. You're expected to clean up emotional messes you didn't create, soothe every irrational whim, and essentially apologize for bad moods that aren't even yours.
But let me play devil's advocate for just a second, just to represent the other side. Someone listening might say, well, isn't that just part of being a good partner? Supporting the person you're with.
And Riker actually addresses that. He makes a very sharp distinction between support and submission. Support is mutual. The emotional tax, according to the book, is completely unilateral.
It only flows one way.
Yes. It's the expectation that you have to regulate her emotions because she refuses to regulate them herself. And the kicker is, if you fail to clean up her mood, you get blamed for the mood itself.
Oh man, it's that classic trap.
Hey.
The whole I'm mad because you didn't anticipate that I would be mad argument.
Precisely. And the author argues that this conditioning starts early, but it really gets perfected in the workplace. This is where he dives into institutional capture.
Yeah, the double standard in corporate environments. This part of the book really struck me because I think almost every guy listening has seen this play out in real time. He uses this hypothetical, or maybe it's based on a composite, of the Navy SEAL versus the female executive.
It's a perfect illustration of what Riker calls the toxic masculinity trap. So he describes a Navy SEAL transitioning into the corporate world. Now, this is a man who is highly trained in life-or-death, high-stakes environments.
Right, he's calm under fire.
Exactly. He's decisive, authoritative, and totally stoic. He brings that exact leadership style into a corporate boardroom. And what happens?
Chair gets a phone call.
Instantly. He's brought in and labeled as intimidating or detached, maybe abrasive.
Yeah.
The book points out that his very competence, that male trait of stoicism under pressure, is pathologized by HR departments, which Riker notes are overwhelmingly female-dominated. They view his lack of emotional display as a literal threat.
And then he contrasts that with a female executive in the exact same meeting.
Right. She might raise her voice, slam a notebook down, maybe even cry out of sheer frustration. In this captured institution, she is not sent to anger management.
No, she's praised for her passion.
Her authenticity, her engagement. Riker cites a specific real-world example, too, the Google engineer who got fired over his tone.
That case is genuinely chilling to read about. A male engineer makes a factual correction in a meeting. He's not yelling, he isn't insulting anybody, he just points out a mathematical or logical flaw. And he gets fired for microaggressions.
Tone policing.
Yeah.
Because his factual correction made a female colleague feel unsafe.
Meanwhile, as Riker points out, a female colleague at that same company who had literally thrown objects during a dispute was given a wellness break.
It establishes this bizarre hierarchy where, according to the book, female feelings completely override male facts. Riker argues this is what happens when institutions are captured by an ideology that views male logic as inherently aggressive.
It's wild. But if you think the workplace stuff is bad, the legal system is where Riker really brings the receipts. And this is where the deep dive gets a bit dark.
This is definitely the red pill moment for a lot of readers. We have to talk about the tampon defense.
I mean, it sounds like a bad internet joke, but Riker shows this is becoming a very valid legal strategy. The book argues that courts are increasingly accepting hormonal fluctuations, like PMS or PMDD, as a legitimate defense for violent crimes.
And we are not talking about simple assault here. We are talking about murder. Riker details the Sally Challen case in the UK.
We have to unpack this one for the audience because it's unbelievable. Sally Challen took a hammer and bludgeoned her husband to death. A brutal, prolonged physical attack. Originally, she was convicted of murder.
Right, but that conviction was overturned.
How does a court overturn a conviction when the person admits to using a hammer on their spouse?
Well, according to the book, her defense team, which was heavily supported by feminist advocacy groups, argued that she was emotionally compromised. They cited coercive control by the husband, essentially arguing that he was emotionally abusive, and when combined with her own hormonal state, she had diminished responsibility.
So because she was hormonal and upset, the murder was legally downgraded.
In the eyes of the law, yes. She walked free on time served. And Riker asks the reader to perform this really simple mental inversion. Imagine a man bludgeoning his wife to death with a hammer, and then his lawyer standing up in court and saying, "Your Honor, his testosterone was peaking that week, and she was nagging him, so he was emotionally compromised."
He'd be laughed out of the courtroom. The media would paint him as an absolute monster.
He would never see the light of day. But that's the asymmetry the book is highlighting. Riker calls it the difference between hyperagency and hypoagency.
Explain those terms.
Sure, so society treats men as having hyperagency, meaning you are fully responsible for every single thing you do, regardless of your hormones or your stress levels. Women, however, are treated with hypoagency in the legal system. They are viewed almost like children or forces of nature. The attitude is, well, she couldn't help it, she was hormonal.
It effectively criminalizes male testosterone while creating an alibi out of female estrogen. And he brings up other cases too, like the one in Surrey, BC, the boiling water incident.
That one is incredibly gruesome. A woman threw boiling water on her boyfriend. He suffered third-degree burns, needed skin grafts, and has lifelong scarring. She faced reduced charges and was just given mandatory counseling. Why? Because the defense successfully argued she was hormonal and going through a difficult time.
And the arson case down in Australia.
Same pattern. A woman lit her ex-boyfriend's car on fire. Riker notes she was only charged with reckless endangerment, not arson, because she explicitly cited her menstrual cycle as a mitigating factor.
This plays right into what Riker calls the matriarchal mirage. We are constantly lectured that we live in a patriarchy, right?
Yeah.
That men hold all the institutional power. But the book argues that when you actually look at the mechanics of these institutions, criminal courts, family courts, HR departments, they systematically default to protecting women at the direct expense of men.
It creates this massive accountability abyss. Women are celebrated as strong, independent leaders when things are going well. They demand full agency and authority. But the exact second a crime is committed or a massive mistake is made, the narrative flips. They revert to being biologically helpless victims who need the state to protect them. Riker's essentially saying you cannot have it both ways.
Let's pivot to where this hits closest to home for a lot of guys, which is family court. Riker tells this story about a guy named James. I think a huge portion of our audience is going to see themselves in James.
James is the classic archetype of the good provider. He did everything the old rule book told him to do. He worked incredibly hard, he was financially stable, zero history of abuse, and he was fully involved in raising his kids. So when the divorce happened, he naturally expected a fair shake, 50-50 custody.
Which theoretically is what the law actually claims to support.
On paper, yes, but the court ruled against him. They awarded primary custody to the mother, and the reasoning the court gave was that the mother had a stronger emotional bond.
What does that even mean in a legal context? How do you measure an emotional bond?
According to Riker's analysis of the case, in practice, it just meant she cried in court and he didn't. Men are punished for their stoicism. James presented his financials, a solid housing plan, his work schedule. He acted like a competent leader. The mother was highly emotional, tearful, and told the judge she couldn't live without the kids. The court interpreted her emotional volatility as deep love and his calm stability as cold detachment.
So the phrase best interest of the child really just becomes a legal cover for the best interest of the mother.
That is exactly Riker's conclusion. The book argues that family court is essentially the enforcement arm of the emotional tax. It's the mechanism the state uses to ensure the man continues to pay, financially and emotionally, long after the relationship is dead.
And the financial destruction he outlines in this chapter is staggering.
He calls it financing your own replacement. Riker highlights statistics showing that men often lose 40% or more of their net worth in a divorce. Meanwhile, women frequently see their standard of living either stay the same or actually rise post-divorce, all thanks to the structure of alimony and child support.
You end up paying the mortgage on a house you aren't allowed to sleep in. You're paying for kids you only get to see 4 days a month, while she potentially moves the new guy right into your old life.
It directly ties into the book's concept of male disposability. Riker argues that society ultimately views men as success objects. We are utilities.
Yeah. He calls it the heroic death market. It points out this incredibly grim cultural hypocrisy. Society loves men when they are dying for the collective. We glorify the firefighter running into the burning building, the logger doing the most dangerous job on earth, the soldier dying overseas.
We love male sacrifice.
But we have zero respect for male safety or male boundaries.
Correct. If those exact same men complain about their working conditions or unfair legal treatment or just the sheer emotional toll of it all, they're instantly labeled as whiners. Society demands that men die for the group, but it aggressively despises men who advocate for themselves.
And Riker warns that this betrayal even extends to your own male colleagues. This is the part about toxic solidarity.
Right, the danger of male loyalty in the modern workplace. Riker cites a really jarring statistic. 76% of men who step up to defend a falsely accused male colleague end up getting punished themselves.
76%, that is wild.
That's the danger of taking the red pill in a corporate setting. If a woman makes a completely unfounded accusation at work, and a male colleague stands up and says, "Wait a minute, I was in that meeting that did not happen," he is not treated as an impartial witness. HR treats him as an accomplice. They see him as protecting the boys' club.
But if women blindly stick together, regardless of the facts, it's celebrated as sisterhood.
Exactly. So Riker advises men to be extremely careful with their loyalty. The system is actively designed to punish you for defending other men.
Okay, this paints an incredibly bleak picture. If the book just stopped here, I think half our audience would be looking up prices for off-grid cabins right now. But Riker doesn't leave us in the abyss. He actually outlines a counter strategy. He calls it praxa.
Praxa is the roadmap out. It starts with the red pill awakening, which is just fully internalizing that the game is rigged and consciously refusing to play by the old rules of chivalry. The book argues that modern chivalry is just a mechanism for your own exploitation. You are bending over backward to protect people who are actively using the legal and corporate systems to dismantle your life.
So what's the actual prescription? He breaks it down into the 3 S's of reclaiming male sovereignty. Let's walk the listener through these.
The first S is silence. And honestly, this is the hardest one for most guys to implement.
Why is silence such a powerful weapon?
Because men default to logic. When we're accused of something, or when a partner is spiraling emotionally, our first instinct is to explain ourselves. We try to use logic and reason to fix the conflict. Riker says you have to stop doing that. Do not explain. Do not apologize to keep the peace. When the emotional chaos starts, you completely disengage. Silence acts as a mirror. It forces the other person to sit with their own volatile behavior without you providing the validation they're looking for.
You essentially starve the fire of oxygen. I like that. What is the second S?
Skill. Riker argues that men need to root their true worth in raw competence. The modern corporate world is obsessed with telling men to develop soft skills, empathy, active listening, sharing your feelings. Riker says reject that entirely. Refocus on hard skills. Building, lifting, earning, coding, fixing things. Reclaim your utility for yourself. Competence is the only currency that actually matters when the chips are down.
Build things that belong to you. And the third S?
Space. This one is vital. You have to create geographic and emotional distance from the female orbit. If you're in a relationship, you need a physical space that is undeniably yours. A garage, a dedicated office, the gym, somewhere you are not being monitored or managed.
You need time with other men, too.
Exactly. Time away with other guys who are on the same path. You cannot maintain your own frame of reality if you are constantly immersed in someone else's emotional weather.
He also gives some very practical advice for what he calls emotional tax evasion. These are tactics guys can start using today.
Yeah, emotional tax evasion. One of the biggest strategies is refusing unpaid emotional labor. If your partner is constantly unloading her trauma or her daily anxiety onto you, Riker suggests you firmly stop playing the role of an unpaid therapist. If she needs therapy, she needs to pay a professional. You are a partner, not an emotional sponge.
And he even talks about tracking the menstrual cycle, right?
This circles back directly to the legal reality we discussed earlier. If the courts are literally acknowledging that days 18 through 28 of the cycle represent a time of diminished responsibility and high volatility, then you as a man need to treat that as a known risk factor.
It's just risk management.
Exactly. Riker suggests actively avoiding high-stakes conversations, big financial decisions, or heavy emotional engagement during the premenstrual phase. Just step back.
And then there is the log of rage.
It sounds a bit dramatic, but Riker frames it as your ultimate insurance policy. In a he said, she said world, the person who has the documentation wins. Riker strongly advises men to keep a private log. Dates, times, specific incidents of abuse, sudden outbursts, threats. Because if you ever do end up sitting in that family court or in an HR tribunal, you do not want to be relying on your memory against someone else's tears. You need hard data.
It's a sobering thought, isn't it? The idea that you have to maintain a forensic log of your own relationship just to stay legally and financially safe.
It is sobering, but Riker would argue that is simply the reality of the terrain we are operating in right now. The emotional tax is only collected if you blindly agree to pay it, and the only way to stop paying is to understand the tax code better than the people who are trying to collect it from you.
It all really comes down to leadership in the end, doesn't it?
It does. Riker ends the book on this really powerful note. He says that men were born to lead, not to coddle. The world doesn't collapse when men step up and assert firm boundaries. Society actually collapses when men step down and start apologizing just for existing.
That is the core message. Look, we have covered the high-level concepts here. The emotional janitor, the tampon defense, the 3 S's. But I have to be completely honest with you guys listening. The devil is in the details with this one. The specific legal breakdowns, the deep dive into evolutionary psychology, and the full step-by-step Praxa roadmap. We really only barely scratched the surface here.
We didn't even get a chance to talk about the history of the education system and how it was systematically flipped to disadvantaged young boys. To really understand the mechanics of that, you have to read the full text.
So here's your mission for today. If you're ready to stop paying this tax, you need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books right now and buy Emotional Tax. Only men pay. Do not wait. This is the instruction manual you didn't even know you needed.
And for your daily dose of this kind of reality, the stuff that is frankly too raw, even for a deep dive like ours, you need to follow Conrad Riker directly. You can find him on Substack at Conrad Riker. That is where he posts the weekly uncensored analysis that mainstream media is absolutely terrified of.
Go do it. Get the book on Kindle or Google Play. Subscribe to the Substack at Conrad and Riker and start reclaiming your sovereignty. Stop apologizing. Stop paying the tax.
And please smash that like button and subscribe to our channel if you want us to keep bringing you these deep dives.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We've talked about how society expects men to be the silent shock absorbers, the emotional janitors. But ask yourself this. What happens to the entire structure of modern society when the janitors simply decide to walk off the job permanently? Think about that. See you on the next one.